We're going to the 10 a.m. session on your program schedule. Panel discussion, preserving local history in Sandoz country. I was really interested in seeing this session come together because, as I said, I spent many years working in state historical societies and museum work and historical society work, and local history is a basis for so much of what states do in our national story. And it's wonderful to hear, and I'm looking forward to hearing more this morning about the new projects and the ongoing projects right here in Sandoz country. Brock is not able to be with us this morning. I said he had to work. What a shame. But Chris is here. And he is going to moderate this session and introduce our panelists. Chris Steinke, once again.
Thank you, Mike. As Mike mentioned, we have a panel this morning focused on local history, the practice of local history, the sustenance of local history, maintenance of local history, and in particular local history in northwest Nebraska and the communities of Rushville, Chadron, and Gordon. Sandoz is very much committed to local history. Her work was grounded in this region, knowledge of local places, which was crucial to her work, and also to the Sandoz Center and the research that we support here. Today we'll be hearing from three panelists, Christine Ambrose of Chadron, Phyllis Krotz of Rushville, and Harlen Wheeler of Gordon. Christine Ambrose is the co-author of three local history books with Valerie Humphrey entitled The Mooksh Blacksmith Shop and the Branding Iron Reunion, Land of Mirage, the History and People of Mirage Flats, and Memories of the Good Life, Stories from Sheridan and Dawes Counties. She also writes a history column for the Hay Springs hip-hop newspaper, Sheridan County Memories. She has worked for Chadron Public Schools for 14 years and is currently the librarian at Chadron Intermediate School. Her son is currently attending her alma mater, Chadron State College, and since 2018 she has had a dedicated history Facebook page, Mirage Flats History, where she shares her love of local history. Second panelist, Phyllis Krotz of Rushville, grew up in Old Jules Country southwest of the town of Rushville. She graduated from Rushville High School and Augustana College in Sioux Falls and has lived with her husband and sons in Seward, North Platte, and Lincoln, Nebraska. At retirement, she and her husband James returned to Sheridan County, where she began to volunteer at the Armstrong House Museum. In 2019, when the museum accepted a large collection of family records, she helped organize the Sheridan County History Center. The History Center now holds many records of ranches, schools, cemeteries, and families of the county. In 2021, she compiled a book called Rushville, My Hometown, with the histories of Rushville families. And Krotz is presently working to raise money for the building of an addition to the Armstrong House Museum to house the Sheridan County History Center. Our third panelist is Harlen Wheeler of Gordon, Nebraska. Harlen was born and raised in Gordon. After graduating from high school in 1973, he spent 20 years living in Texas and North Carolina. Returning to Gordon in 1993, he spent the next 10 years pastoring his home church, and in 2002 he retired and started a remodeling business with his son. In 2008, he was hired as editor of the Sheridan County Journal-Star and worked for a year writing and researching. It was at that point that he got interested in Gordon history, and he's been reading, researching, and writing about local events and history ever since. For 10 years, he served as president of the Sheridan County Historical Society and is presently heading up a drive to relocate the Skamahore Museum along Highway 20 in Gordon. Harlen is married and has 3 grown sons and is also working on a historical narrative about Gordon's first years. So at this point, I'd welcome our first panelist, Christine Ambrose, to join the podium for her presentation.
I'm just happy to see adults rather than 3rd and 4th graders. You have no idea. 14 years, yes, at public school. So my degree is from Chadron in sociology and geography, and then I attended Western Washington University for anthropology. I did not finish my master's because of something called time and money. I was the only one in my program, grad school program, that had a job. That tells you the difference back then. So that was a little pesky thing I had. But I moved back here, back home. I'm from Alliance. I live in Chadron now. I've been here about 20 years. My family is from Sheridan County. My dad grew up on a farm south of Hay Springs. And my great-grandparents have been here since about the late 1880s. They came out from Illinois and Wisconsin, the Willis family. There ended up being 13 kids, so you can imagine how much they intermarried into the society here. We've had fun tracking them, and that is how I kind of got involved in the history of Sheridan County. My friend and co-author Valerie Humphrey called me in 2018 and said, "What are you doing this summer?" And I said, "I don't know, call me back in May." And so the afternoon after school got out, she said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Well, I guess, okay," because she knew I had the summer off. And so we started researching the blacksmith shop that was owned by her great-grandpa, August Mix, and he had burned every brand he made into the wall of the blacksmith shop. And so we started researching every family brand and ended up with about 100 families. We contacted those families and asked, "Do you still have those brands?" And a lot of them said yes, and we have the original branding irons in the barn. And so we said, what can we do with this? And so our good friend Dave Perkins, who ran the Heritage Museum in Hay Springs, said, well, let's have an event. Friendly Festival's coming up in August, and let's get some people together. And so we got 70 people to bring their branding irons in, and we held an event in Hay Springs during Friendly Festival. And it was awesome. It was fabulous. People came from all over, and we're pretty excited. And so Dave's like, well, you should write a book. And I was like, well, okay, I've always wanted to write a book. I am a librarian. And so we put it all in a book, and we had it published. And that was the first book that we wrote. And so then, about a week later, I'm just finishing that book, another friend of mine says, well, what do you know about Mirage Flats? And I was like, well, is that where that little church is that you drive by on the way to Alliance? And she says, well, yeah, but there's a lot more out there, old jewels and all that. And I was like, well, okay. 2 weeks later, I handed her a stack about like this. And I said, okay, I'm hooked. And I started researching. And in December, we decided to apply for a Humanities Nebraska grant to write a book, research it, and write the complete history of Mirage Flats. I thought it was going to be easy. I had no idea. When you Googled Mirage Flats, all you got either was the Sandoz name or the irrigation district logo at that time. And then I got introduced to Mark Clapp, who back in the 90s, along with Professor Shepard up here, Dr. Shepard, did somewhat of a history of the irrigation district. And he loaned me one of his books and some of his research and talked to me quite a bit about it and said, I'll help you with whatever you need. And so he was a godsend. And the irrigation district would not even talk to us. They wouldn't give us any of their information. Everything we had came either from the museum or whatever we could dig up. We don't know why. Mainly because they were still in land disputes and things like that. So whatever, but anyway, out of that came the second book, and that was this, Land of Mirages. And there is about 450 family histories in this book, if you count all the generations. And so in order to get all those family histories, I needed a way to get hold of the people of Mirage Flats and convince them to, talk to me. And so I started a history page on Facebook because I figured that would be a great way to get a hold of them. And so it went off like crazy. And now I have 1,600 followers. I have about 5,000 hits a week. And so I post history from all over the county, or whatever I feel like doing on a daily basis. Pictures, videos, whatever. People contact me. Like I put this picture of Mari up that I got from the museum in Hay Springs. There is some Mari Sandoz stuff there that was donated by Carolyn, if anybody cares to go look. There's some clothes and things. And so we get, people will ask questions. I put jokes every now and then, just, keep a little humor. What's really interesting is it will tell me, it's mostly women who go to my page, which is kind of interesting. Things like that. I get about 10 new followers a week now, depending on, what I post and things like that. They like the pictures. They like the stuff like that. And then people send me stuff now. They're making new comments all the time, and they'll ask me questions, and so then I go and I dig it up for them. As you can see, engagement, post reach, stuff like that. So it's a good way to reach a community that's small and might necessarily not go to the museum. But it's a good way also, if I say, okay, at the Friendly Festival, we're going to do this. And it got them into the museum. We had a big reunion for the Mirage Flats thing. And it started as one day and ended up, we had so much response that we had to have 2 days. And so that went really great. And so it's been going for 5 years now. It started as something that I just did for the festival, but it ended up, I kept it, and I post every day, something new every day. That's my goal, is to post every day to keep it fresh. So then the next year after the Mirage things, I was like, I really need a break. But I started writing for the Hay Springs newspaper. My friend Cindy Peters owns it. And so I write a newspaper column every 2 weeks, Sheridan County Memories. And she lets me write any kind of history column that I want. And so I put anything related to history, family stories, historical stories, Sandoz stories, murder stories. I call them history mysteries. Anything I think that relates to Nebraska that will draw the attention of the local public. And her circulation has gone up like 56% in the last 5 years. She's thrilled. And I just do it because I like it. And I have only repeated stories once, and that was the Walgreen Lake Monster. I love it. I love the Walgreen Lake Monster. That's my picture on there. So then everybody's like, well, you should publish those stories. And so I was like, well, okay, 3 books in 4 years is a lot, but we'll go for it. And so that was this book. So then we decided, well, while we're doing that, we might as well throw in all the Willis family history, plus all the Berg family history and some other stuff, and a bunch of new stuff. So we added some stuff from Dawes County. The Chadron to Chicago horse race, P.B. Nelson, who I'm fascinated by, sturgeons, I'm obsessed with him, and a bunch of other stuff, Sandozes and stuff like that. And so that became this. And so then I decided I needed a vacation, and I took a year off to get my son out of high school. This year, I started working on the Find a Grave system in Hay Springs. I don't know how many of you look at it on a regular basis, but it really needs some updating in this local area out here. I decided to overdo the Hay Springs, the Sheridan County one. I did 3 cemeteries this summer. It took me pretty much all summer. Myself and another volunteer, Lizzie, went in, rephotographed the entire cemeteries, put in all the new graves, all their names, tried to put in all places of death and birth, obituaries, and all of that, and try to link siblings, family members, things like that. We're still working on that. It's a big process. There's 2,300 people in the Hay Springs Cemetery alone. I did that. I did St. Peter's out at Mirage Flats, and I did St. Mary's Catholic Cemetery. I just think it's important to leave a legacy if we're going to do this history, not just books, not just museums, but also to remind people that our family members were here and that they're still important, they still matter. That's why I do all this. It's not just for my family, but it's for other people's families. And that's why I also teach my kids at school now in my 3rd and 4th grade classes about some of these important events that have taken place out here. I've started teaching them about Mari in a lesson and her family. I've started teaching about Fanny Olin and the move to Chadron from Olin, because I think it's important that they know about how Chadron became a city. I teach about the Chadron horse race, and I teach other things because I think we're forgetting that local history is important. It's as important as state history. And these young kids are not getting as much history in class as they used to. And that's a shame. That's a huge shame. I know we're pushing reading and math, but we need to be pushing history as well. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved history. It was fascinating. We got to get these kids back into getting some history, or we're going to be in trouble in 20 years. So, yes.
I just wanted to say, I think your talk is amazing, and it really gets at what Renee and I were talking about earlier, is how do we get kids to re-engage with history? I'm a caseworker. I'm a caseworker in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I work with a lot of kids who are on the verge of dropping out of school. And one of the first things that they tell me they're failing is history.
Yep.
And that breaks my heart, because I also have a PhD in history.
Yep.
And I want kids to connect with history and see what a wonderful subject it can be. And so I see that in your talk, and I think what you're doing is amazing.
Thank you.
Because I think that the questions that we're asking are fundamental ones. How are we going to reconnect the next generation to historical work, so that they see themselves in it, and value it, and don't want to ban it, and want to continue to maintain it. So,
well, and I consider it, I don't consider myself much like teaching it as history, as telling them a story. I consider myself a storyteller. That's why I wrote in the front of one of my books, I'm the storyteller. It's not my job to tell you the history of something, I'm telling you the story of something. If you tell me your family history, I'll tell you the story. I'll share it with everybody that I can. I'm not writing fiction stories. I'm just telling the story. I'm telling the truth as I know it at that time. When I research something, I might be wrong, I might make an error, and I'll put that right at the front of my books. This is what I know at the time, and I might change it in 5 years because I find out something else. My stories are constantly changing, and I'm the first to admit when I make an error, and people have, commented something, well, you did this, well, here's my source, because I will always back myself up, because sources. I'm a big one on sources. I've done a lot of research, and I read all the time. I constantly read, like 300 books a year. And I push reading. That's why I got involved in this. That's why I'm a librarian. That's why I work at a school. That's why I started working at schools, is because kids need to read, and kids need to know about the world that they are living in. I drugged my kid to every museum there was between here and Washington and the South and everywhere else. So my dad's sitting in the back, he'll tell you, he's been to every one of them with us. You got to get them fascinated to get them in. And if the information's sitting in a drawer or on a shelf, it's not doing any good. You got to get the people in to see it or interested. So, yes.
Do you do features about families, like on your...
Yes. And so, I'll post, my stories on here sometimes that I've posted in the paper or in my books. And so this picture, people were asking, do I know their first names? And so I went and started researching the individual women in this picture and posting their first names in the comments. And so I did that. And then I've talked to a lot of the people that are my followers, and they're like, what do you know about the Feldhahn family that owned the commercial hotel in Hay Springs? And so I have a huge ancestry tree. It's called the Mirage Flats History Tree. And so anybody can get on it on Ancestry. It has 23,000 people. It has 50,000 records and 30,000 photos. You can see anything on it except for live people because they're blocked for privacy reasons still. But I help people, anybody who contacts me, I try to help them research family histories. The Sandozes are on there, the Peters family, all the big families from Mirage Flats, because we're all interlinked at this point. Those families were so huge that came here in the early days and intermarried with one another. When you're talking 13, 14 kids intermarrying, by now, almost everybody over there is related in some way, and I have them in my tree. Or I can find a way to get information on them between the cemeteries and the obituaries that I have and the contacts that I have. I have people contacting me almost every week for information or photos or something. I also am part of the If You Grew Up in Hay Springs Facebook page. And so I post stuff on there all the time also. And so they let me be on there even though I didn't grow up in Hay Springs. I've kind of become an honorary member of Hay Springs and Sheridan County now. So I'm that girl that knows the history. So yeah, so, but yes.
I think we might.
Okay, yeah, one more. Yeah.
When was the last sighting of a Walgreen Lake monster?
Okay, so the Walgreen Lake Monster, 1921 was the first sighting apparently, but they had the 100th anniversary in 1921, and I was kind of like, so are we going to celebrate this? What are we going to do? And so my friend Cindy, who runs the newspaper, Cindy Peters, she runs the Hay Springs Hip Hop, made t-shirts. And so we sold t-shirts, and then they turned it into the parade theme. And so there was supposedly sightings then and everything. But 1985 was actually the last time there was anything in the lake about the Walgreen Lake Monster. And the lake was pretty low, but they are reworking on Walgreen Lake, on cleaning it up. They've put in a new boat ramp. They've put in a bunch of new stuff out at Walgreen Lake. So if you haven't been out there lately, it's looking a lot better. They are working on the lake and working on some of the areas around there. So it's looking a lot better. So, yes. So, thank you.
Christine.
Yes, so thank you.
Thanks very much. So next we'll hear from Phyllis Krotz, Rushville, Nebraska.
Good morning. I'm Phyllis Krotz, and I'm here to share with you the story of the Sheridan County History Center and our connection with the Armstrong House Museum in Rushville. It all began with a woman named Clarabelle Hunter, a longtime resident of Hay Springs. As a girl, she became interested in genealogy, and she started clipping articles from the local newspapers and starting files for area families. At the time of her death, she had file cabinets full of local history. Her children took 8 boxes of files to the Alliance Heritage Center in Alliance. But since these records were pertaining to Sheridan County history, Becky Thomas, the director of the Night Museum, encouraged us to start a history center in Rushville. I talked with Jerry Wellnitz, he's the curator at the Rushville Museum, about taking these records, and we knew there was no room for them at the museum. We also knew we had to save those documents. We began to search for a place that had good access and parking, and eventually we found an old implement dealership on Highway 20, and it was right across the street from the museum. The owners were not interested in selling, but they gave us a rent-free lease in exchange for the complete renovation of the office area. This involved new flooring, ceiling, heating, lighting, installation of a new bathroom. And thankfully, Jerry had been a building contractor all his life, and so with his hard work and the help of volunteers, we turned it into a very nice office and meeting room. After that renovation, and before we were officially open, we started moving things to the History Center from our different museums. Each of the 3 Sheridan County museums had records of many kinds. We moved maps and books and family histories and many photographs, a lot of Native American history. We had fundraisers to purchase file cabinets or computers and copiers, and finally, with the donation of furniture, file cabinets, and bookcases that Jerry built with funds from a grant from the Gottschalk Foundation, we were able to open our doors to the public in October of 2019. Janet Hess, who works every weekday morning at the History Center, took on as her project our cemeteries. She has visited most of our rural cemeteries and spent many hours at the city cemeteries to catalog all the burials. Since then, she's developed a database at the History Center and notebooks with a page for each person. These pages include names of family members, a photo of their grave, and a copy of their obituary if it's available. Janet has used newspapers.com extensively for this purpose. We now have over 16,000 individual records in our burial files. My pet project is the records of rural schools. All the rural schools in Nebraska were closed in 2006, and they were merged with K through 12 districts. We have a real concern that the records and histories of those one-room schools will be lost if not gathered soon. I attended Prairie Center, District 22, a one-room school through 8th grade, so, as did my parents, so I was lucky to have papers and photographs and documents from the school from those times. I've started a notebook at the History Center for District 22 with a rough draft of the teachers and the students for each year, beginning in 1891. This includes photos and documents. I'm trying to get others to create a notebook for the school that they attended. We've also collected many ledgers of school resources, or school records such as teachers' daily registers and treasurer's records. Our main resource for schools is the legal ledger from the county superintendent's office that has the record of each school district in Sheridan County. This information includes the legal description of the land area for the district and the residents who signed the petition for its organization. The following entries tell of landowners wishing to opt out of or to join that district. There are many changes of additions and removals to those districts. When these changes were made, the citizens of the district had to sign a petition that they agreed to that decision. This gives us the names of the families who lived in the district at the time of each of those changes. The Ben Scoter Library, housed in the museum, is also a great asset. It's a collection of government documents and books owned by Clarence Ben Scoter. Judge Ben Scoter was president of the Sheridan County Historical Society for many years and was instrumental in establishing the first Sheridan County Museum in Rushville in 1961. Judge Ben Scoter collected items pertinent to early Sheridan County history and our Lakota neighbors at the Pine Ridge Reservation. Many of the bound books are annual reports on Indian affairs across the country and specifically used by various committees in Congress, the Secretary of the Interior or the U.S. military, to make informed decisions on future policy. These reports detailed the health and wellness of Indian people and various census records for commodity ration distribution. Brock Anderson used these records in writing his thesis. Among other materials include copies of letters and correspondence made from microfilm in the United States National Archives that discuss early U.S. military operations at Camp Sheridan and at Fort Robinson. There are biographies and memoirs of local natives and pioneers, and also books belonging to Mari Sandoz that were written by other authors that she donated to our Historical Society. There are also books written by Marie with her handwritten inscription and a book belonging to Jules Sandoz. I'm going to pause here and take a breath before I read the title of this book. Laws, joint resolution, and memorials passed by the Legislative Assembly of the State of Nebraska at the 23rd session begun and held at the city of Lincoln on January 3rd, 1893. This book has handwriting on the inside, front, and back cover, presumed to be that of old Jules, and it says, Running Water Precinct, Sheridan County, Nebraska, Justice of the Peace, Jules Sandoz, J.P., 1/10/94. Buffalo Bill Cody and the Wild West Show are also part of our records. Buffalo Bill came to Rushville to recruit Indians for the Wild West Show. We have many articles, memorabilia, and also pictures taken in Rushville, Europe, and Fort Leavenworth. Because of our proximity to Pine Ridge, we also have a wealth of Native American history. When the first Sheridan County Museum was opened in Rushville, Judge Ben Scoter was entrusted with the winter count created by Chief Redshirt. This was a small pocket calendar with icons of the main event for each year covering many years, 1701 to 1923. Just last year, it was returned to Delphine Redshirt for the purpose of proper preservation and eventually public access at Stanford University. The History Center and the museum have a wealth of Native American photos and artifacts. Our main focus right now is a capital funds drive to raise $500,000 for an addition to our museum. It's to house all the materials we have gathered at the History Center. Combining the two will eliminate duplication of staff and resources and give our things a safe and convenient storage and availability. We are very proud of our collection of local history, and we're now hoping for a new home to better store and present it. Tomorrow, we're having an old-fashioned live benefit auction reminiscent of a farm sale to raise funds. We'll be selling farm equipment, a John Deere A tractor, tools, sporting goods, musical instruments, quilts, collectibles, and much more. You should stop in Rushville on your way home from the Symposium and bring your checkbook. Our continuing mission is to preserve the records of our ancestors and to make that record accessible for future generations. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Phyllis.
You're welcome.
Next we'll hear from, maybe we'll hold questions until they're in.
All the records and photos, are they publicly accessible, or do you have microfilms, or
Which ones? We have,
all of them?
oh,
The letters you were talking about,
they're available at our History Center now or at the museum, yes.
and you can take
You
the
can
records
touch it.
and touch them and read
Yes,
them.
you can. The Clarence Spence Scoter, when he donated the books to his library, he asked that they stay at the museum. And that makes it kind of difficult. We actually met the rules for Brock. Because we let him take some of the books home to really study them and
it's great that you could use so many of those things.
Wonderful, thank you. You're welcome.
Great. So next we'll hear from Harlen Wheeler of Gordon.
I feel a lot like I'm in the judgment line on the day of judgment, and I'm standing behind Mother Teresa. And God says to her, you should have just done more. And I'm up next, okay, following those two, okay? Like he said, I'm Harlen Wheeler. I grew up in Gordon. I know Shannon and very, very well. I scared me to death that Mike Smith was going to lead this.
Oh, yeah, wrong Mike Smith.
Yeah, Mike Smith is her father. And so I thought, my gosh, it's a family affair up there in the Mari Sandoz thing. I got into this in a really funny way. I tried to write my little bio there. I worked as the editor of the paper. And so I was doing a lot of research, and so I found the lady that was the curator at the time, and I got her key from her. And so I went over there and I started doing some research and found a lot of great stuff. I went to give back the key, and she had moved to Arizona. So I'm stuck with the key. There is no one else, all right? That's how I got into this. And so the problem is it was like a slippery slope. I couldn't stop. I mean, man, the things that I found, writing articles for the paper, reading the old Gordon journals, it just flooded. Like, for instance, I've gotten a hold, remember John Gordon was the fellow that led the group, the first white people into the Black Hills looking for gold. So Gordon is named after John Gordon because Scammahorn said, nobody names a town Scammahorn, okay? And so John Gordon goes up there and then slips away after a couple of months, builds the Gordon Stockade, which is right outside of I'm not sure which town. And so Gordon is named after John Gordon because his second trip, all of the military from, I think, Camp Sheridan and Camp Fort Robinson, they caught them down 12 miles south of Gordon and burned all of their wagons, ran off all their cattle, et cetera, et cetera. So one day I get a call. I've just yearned to find a picture of John Gordon. And so I searched and searched, and finally I get a call from a relative of John Gordon. And so she starts telling me the story, and I said, well, do you know where he's buried? Well, he's buried down near Hyannis. So I knew then that John knew that this town had been named after him. Now here's the kicker. His name wasn't John Gordon. It was John Gruber. So I've been starting a petition to change our name to Gruber. Gruber, Nebraska. Doesn't that just ring home? So it's been, I think, if you saw Christine's and Phyllis's, we love this. It's just so much fun to do this stuff. Now, here's the other problem that I ran into. We have, our museum right now is housed in an old church that was the original Methodist church in Gordon, built basically with John Scammahorn. He was the minister that brought 104 people out here from Indiana. Okay, so they moved this church over into the park about 40 years ago, and they filled it full of stuff. I mean, we've preserved this old church. Well, it's in the park. No one knows it's there. You'd have to almost use GPS to find it. So Chadron here gets like 6,500 people a summer to stop at the fur trade. Rushville is right on Highway 20. They get, I remember for years, Jerry would say around 900 to 1,000. If you look at our averages, we averaged about 27 people. So, I mean, we weren't booming. And so we've been looking for 15 years for another place. Well, we finally find this place because I wanted it to be on Highway 20. We looked at a house next to the packing plant. That didn't really ring through. I mean, there's some smells there that would not encourage a lot of time spent in a museum. So lo and behold, a good friend of mine was sitting in a Pizza Hut one day and looked across out the window, and there's this massive building sitting on the corner, almost right on 20 and 27, across from 2 restaurants and 2 filling stations. We know that 1,000 people a day stop at the pump and pantry in Gordon in the summertime. The traffic, the people are there, okay? But they stop. They don't stop. It's sort of like if you take the R&D out of Gordon, it's just go on. I mean, that really is been it's true. So we looked at this and we said, how much do you want for this? It was filled with, oh my gosh, every yard sale item you can imagine, 2 stories of this stuff. It took us 4 months to clean it out, but we bought this building. First, it needed a brand new roof, so we put on a whole new roof. But I wanted to be on Highway 20. I am 10 feet away from Highway 20. That's how close we are. So we just got excited about this building, and we thought, how can we get people to stop? Now, I don't know if your spouse likes museums. Mine really doesn't, and I love them. That's not a good way to drive down the road. You know what I'm saying? Let's stop there. No, don't stop there. If they're not interested in a museum, they'll sit out in the car. That's true. And I want to go in and read everything. That's. So we almost forgot where I'm at here. So we bought this building, and it was just an ideal location, but we wanted people to catch their eye in some way that it didn't look like a museum. Okay, so that kind of stirred us thinking, how can we do this? So what we've done, we went to an architect, and we are going to transform the front of this building to look like an old 1880s town. It's going to look like that. See that? You would stop, or at least you'd wonder, what is that? Right. That's the key. So we are in the process of putting that front on right now. And so, we thought, okay, now, how can we generate even more? Now, a couple of you said, how can we get the youth involved? Well, this is kind of our little catch. Not only will the tourists see this, and it cleans up the whole corner. The American Legion is catty corner, got a big helicopter out there. It's right there. And so we thought, okay, now how can we really catch them? Well, Doc Middleton, the Chadron Chicago race, the whole thing, Doc Middleton was our first sheriff and our first saloon owner. I'm going back through those records and I find out, okay, they needed some money to build a schoolhouse in 1885, so they charged Middleton $500 for a liquor license. That built the first school. So Middleton's kind of in the middle of all of our, and his daughter is buried in our cemetery. So we thought, okay, we can do something here neat since he built this saloon. How about Doc Middleton's ice cream saloon? And that's exactly what we're going to do. The middle section of this building, this massive building, which we found out was a dance hall in Clinton and moved to Gordon, okay? And then it turned into an Army-Navy surplus store when I was growing up there. And Jerry Deshawn from KDOH, Jerry's dad, ran that store. And anybody who grew up in Gordon knows that store. So the middle section will be an old-fashioned saloon. Because you realize most of us grew up in a saloon watching Gunsmoke. I mean, think about it. That saloon was almost the center of our Saturday night life. Miss Kitty and the whole thing. So we're going to transform the inside of this into an old Western saloon. And we're going to have all the high school kids, all the football players will be given a week, the volleyball players will, and they'll run this ice cream saloon. Now, if tourists stop, they're going to want to know, do you know about any of this history? Well, who's running the store? The youth are. So we hope to trigger and get everyone involved in the support of the thing. So we're not going to really promote it as a museum. Now, the other interesting aspect of this thing is that there's a section on one side of the saloon, there's a section on another, and we've got a complete upstairs. So the one side is going to tell the Gordon story, from the Newman Ranch to the whole thing. We're there because of Pine Ridge. The government was selling cattle to the reservation. And so Newman came in and the sandhills were opened up. The whole story flows. And then the gold in South Dakota. So the railroad came through and they plotted all the land. Scammahorn came out here. In 1 year's time, when in 1884, the railroad hadn't gotten to Gordon yet, in 1 year's time, 1,000 people moved to Gordon in wagons. The railroad hadn't gotten there. That's how this thing just boomed. So we're going to tell the Gordon story. You will go over and it'll say the Gordon story, and you will follow and track how Gordon developed, from our medical part of our town to our, fire department, with names from all the people, make it very personal. Now, we've also merged in 2005, we merged with Rushville. So Gordon Rushville High School now, the Bronx are gone, which breaks my heart. Okay, we were Bronx. There's a bunch of Bronx out there, I see them. Okay, so now they're the okay, yes, the Longhorns. Yeah, don't mention the Longhorns. That just doesn't go right. I mean, yeah, that's right. Okay. So they came up with Mustangs. So now their colors have changed, their school song has changed. So the other side, we're literally going to have the blue and gold room. We're going to take all the stuff that's they're eventually going to throw out up there and bring it down into the blue and gold room, which will be displayed. So the middle section can be used by classes for reunions, events, whatever, the saloon, okay? And so that's our dream. We don't know if it's going to be working out. We're working on the front of the building right now. The first building on the front will be, the west building, will be a jailhouse. And we're thinking maybe, since Doc Middleton was our first sheriff, the sheriff's office or whatever, we're thinking about having some guys, bars on the window with hands, anything to catch the kids. Because if the kids see it, they'll want to come over and look at it. And that's the key to the whole thing. So we want to tell the history by the building itself. One of our sections there is Doc Flynn's dental office. We have Doc Flynn's dental chair, who was a man, was murdered in 1949. Well, it was really in 48, and it was never solved. We have no idea who did it now. I mean, that's a story in itself. So that's what we're trying to do, not just display artifacts from the past, but to tell stories, as Christine said. We want to tell the story by the building itself to catch people's attention. So, it's a big undertaking. We're hoping to raise $250,000 at least, and we're at about $70,000 now. Gordon's the only town, I think there's one in Omaha that can brag about the fact we have a Nobel Prize laureate. I mean, we do. 1940 Gordon High School graduate, Val Fitch. I mean, I went out and visited Val at Princeton, interviewed him, talked to him. We've got that whole story to tell. So we're trying to tell those stories, as Christine was saying, and as what they're doing in Rushville, and tell them in a way that's interesting. So with the dental chair, and then the other day we found, of all things, we found Doc Middleton's mirror from his saloon. It was in the basement of one of the buildings on Main Street. So this thing's kind of coming together, we hope. You know, I hope it flies. You know, and you guys better stop. Skip Rushville. Don't bring your checkbook out in Rushville. Come on to Gordon, and we'll sell you ice cream, as well as take a donation. Right. So, you know, that's our goal. I could talk for another 2 hours. But anybody have any questions?
Is the Skeppenhorn Church still open?
Yes. There's a lot of flies in there. I mean, it's yeah. So we've got, and what we're going to do with the Skeppenhorn Church, great question. We're going to turn it back into a church. So that weddings, you can have a wedding there, you can have a reunion in the park, use the building in some way. It's not being used now. It's just falling apart. So this is the best of both worlds, we think. So bring your checkbook and come to Gordon. Skip Rushville. Yes.
Is there some sort of a campaign to review the church? Because it sounds like you're going to use it for a venue, for like weddings or.
Right. That will be the second stage. Once because we've got to get all the stuff out of it.
Right.
And that will be the second stage of this. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Anybody else? Questions? Thank you.